The greatest destroyer of peace today is the cry of the innocent unborn child. Teresa, to me, is an icon of compassionate care for the poor and the disadvantaged. The work she did in India really challenged entrenched notions of caste and gender roles. Mother Teresa, the tireless worker for the poor and underprivileged, has died, representing a life of charity, altruism, and virtue. Mother Teresa devoted her entire life to God and to the poor. Righteous faith will always be undermined by the powers of Satan. He makes people doubt God's witnesses, and that is the reason why many people doubt whether Mother Teresa was truly perfect, chaste, and flawless. As we know, things about her were only revealed after her death, and it shocked the whole world. The embodiment of compassion, the Nobel Peace Prize was accepted in 1979 as the world's way of thanking Mother Teresa for her unwavering dedication to the destitute and the needy. At that moment, she delivered an inspiring speech to the world. She eloquently discussed her journey to find peace through service to the world's poor and downtrodden. She also articulated her lifelong commitment to advocating for peace, promoting mutual care, and nurturing spirituality. She declined the monetary reward associated with the prize, instead directing it toward impoverished India's welfare. She also convinced the Nobel Committee to allocate funds meant for a celebratory banquet to feed the needy. Mother Teresa's mission wasn't confined by geography or age. Even in her 80s, she actively supported the destitute in Kolkata, India, and raised funds globally. Mother Teresa dedicated her entire life to serving those in need, from the streets of Kolkata to poverty-stricken communities around the world. Mother Teresa brought hope and love to countless individuals. She preached compassion and shed light on societal ills such as abortion and drug addiction, while bringing to all humans a beacon of hope and joy. With a heart full of empathy, Mother Teresa approached each person she encountered as a beloved child of God. Whether it was providing food for the hungry, shelter for the homeless, or medical care for the sick, her work extended beyond material assistance. Mother Teresa recognized that true poverty went beyond just physical needs. It encompassed loneliness, abandonment, and spiritual emptiness. She sought not only to alleviate suffering but also to offer solace and companionship through her presence. In her interactions with those living in extreme poverty, Mother Teresa displayed incredible humility and respect. She treated everyone equally regardless of their background or circumstances. This unwavering commitment to treating all individuals with love and compassion became one of her defining principles. Holiness and charity are what people said about Mother Teresa throughout her life, but if people thought that they knew the whole truth about Mother Teresa, they were wrong. The dark night of the soul, the inner struggle of this holy woman, lay beneath this facade of serenity. There was a massive spiritual emptiness that Mother Teresa had been feeling for more than 50 years following her initial visions and revelations. Mother Teresa was wrapped in a dark, pitiless silence. She only once more heard the voice of God, and she believed the doors of heaven had been closed and bolted against her. The more she longed for some sign of His presence, the more empty and desolate she became. People always saw her smiling. She had a playful, mischievous smile as if privy to some secret joke, especially when she was around children. She beamed with delight. In private, she had a quick, self-deprecating sense of humor and sometimes doubled over from laughing so hard. So many people who spent time with her came away saying that she was the most joyful person they had ever met. But no one knows the darkness covering her soul. In a private letter to Reverend Michael Vayner Pete, which came to light very recently, we know that in secret her life was a living hell. In the darkness she wrote, "Lord my God, who am I that you should forsake me, the child of your love, and now become as the most hated one, the one you have thrown away as unwanted, unloved? I call, I cling, I want, and there is no one to answer. When I try to raise my thoughts to heaven, there is such convicting emptiness that those very thoughts return like sharp knives and hurt my very soul. Love, the word, it brings nothing. I am told God lives in me, and yet the reality of darkness and coldness and emptiness is so great that nothing touches my soul." Mother Teresa lived in a spiritual desert, panicked that God had rejected her, or worse, that He was there in the dark, hiding from her. As if by some strange formula, the greater her success and public acclamation, the more abandoned, humiliated, and desperate she felt. There was a brief period, 1 month in 1958, when she was able to pierce the darkness. Her light came during a Requiem Mass celebrated the day after the death of Pope Pius XII, the Pope who had granted her permission to leave Loreto and go among the poor. She wrote there and then, "Today my soul is filled with love, with joy untold, with an unbroken union of love." But 4 weeks later, the darkness had descended again. She lived in this darkness until the end of her life. Other saints have told of their spiritual torments and feelings of abandonment by God. In the 16th century, St. John of the Cross described the experience as the dark night of the soul, but we would be hard-pressed to find another saint who suffered a darkness so thick or a night so long as Mother Teresa suffered. Never before, perhaps in the history of the saints, have we been given such an honest and plain-spoken account of the dark night of a soul. In Mother Teresa's dark night, we can hear all the anguish of her century, the isolation of the poor, the cries of the unwanted, the children of the atheist, of all those who can't murmur a prayer or feel love anymore. It was as if, in some way she was bearing their sufferings, and in this she seemed in some way to be sharing too in the sufferings of Christ. She experienced these graces immediately, or almost immediately, before beginning her work in the slums for the poorest of the poor. Jesus was asking her directly and in a most vivid way to change her life utterly, and asking her also to establish a new religious society or community of nuns. I want Indian nuns, missionaries of charity, who would be my fire of love amongst the poor, the sick, the dying and the little children. At that time the year was 1946. Mother Teresa wrote, "In all my prayers and holy communions, he is continually asking, 'Will you refuse me?'" Alarmed at the thought of what was being asked of her and conscious of her own littleness and weakness, Mother Teresa replied, "My own Jesus, what you ask is beyond me. I can hardly understand half of the things you want. I am unworthy, I am sinful, I am weak." But by way of response to these words, at some point later in the interchange between them, she hears Jesus saying to her, "You are, I know, the most incapable person, weak and sinful, but just because you are that, I want to use you for my glory. Will you refuse? Fear not, it is I who am asking you to do this for me. Fear not, even if the whole world is against you, laughs at you, your companions and superiors look down on you, fear not. It is I in you, with you, for you." Furthermore, she wrote in 1974 to a priest suffering his own spiritual blackness, "In you today he wants to relive his complete submission to his Father. It does not matter what you feel but what he feels in you. You and I must let him live in us and through us in the world." We now see these words as beautifully autobiographical, reflecting her awareness that in her emptiness and poverty, she was being mystically grafted onto the life of Christ, being emptied as he was in assuming our humanity and being crucified as he was in offering himself for our sins. After her death, it was disclosed that in her early missionary days, long before hearing her call to the poor, Mother Teresa had quietly made a private vow of spiritual espousal to be all for Jesus and to refuse him nothing. From her letters, we can see that she understood her darkness as an ordeal, a divine trial. In the dark night, her vow of self-offering was being put to the test. Would she really refuse him nothing, drink the cup her Lord drank, lay down her life as he had laid down his life, offer herself as he did, completely and without reserve? In her dark night, Jesus was claiming Mother Teresa for his own, pledging himself to his spiritual bride, pruning away her self-love and pride, purifying her in heart, mind and intention, stripping away all that would keep her from total union with him. She died almost 100 years to the day after her patron, the little flower of Lizo, experienced a night of nothingness. On her deathbed, she heard demonic voices telling her that heaven was just a figment of her imagination. Following these into this night of nothingness, Mother Teresa too sought the holy face of the crucified and the crushed and the dying. She walked the path of spiritual childhood in the small ordinary realities of her days and lived her life one little act of love at a time.